What's going on, folks? Want to come on for a brief episode, just talking about something that I have been looking at and just reflecting on in relation to the work that I do. And it's something that I feel like for yourselves that tune into these episodes and who are really interested and invested in the best ways of reaching, impacting, and influencing young men and masculinities, is something here that for me has been really useful to reflect on. I want to share with you in this episode. So I will link the full report to what I'm sort of talking from and about in the episode description. It's a big-ish report. There's lots of different strands of data. It's a really, really good, I call it a calibrator. So shout out to the folks at Ecomundo for really putting together a really, really useful body of research around young men and masculinities in the online space, what's driving some of their activity, but also how we as people, as community, as professionals can attune and reach them in a range of different ways. But there's something in this specific body of work for me that explains a couple of things, but I want to focus on one in this episode. One of the things that I'm reflecting on a lot from this particular report and data set, for lack of a better term, is what was shared in this report was that men and masculinities tend to engage better with content that cultivates the impression or cultivates the, I suppose, association of an inside experience. That's Lewis Wedlock's poor man paraphrase. Essentially what they were saying was that if we're looking to reach young men and masculinities online, we have to cultivate an inside experience where it's not talking at, this is what's wrong, this is what's right, but there is a sense of being inside an experience, whether that's watching people communicate and talk, that you feel like you're part of the discussion. It's almost, for lack of a better term, a parasociality. Now, this is really interesting for me, particularly when I think about the following: the pull of and the constant pull of the manosphere or manosphere-adjacent content. We as people in the space, whether that's educators, researchers, people who work alongside young men and masculinities, people who observe young men and masculinities in the work that we do, whether we're coaches in a sports team, however that is and whatever that role is, whatever that service looks like. One of the questions that's been frequently asked over the past 3 years in particular is, well, what is the pull of some of these spaces? Why do they feel like they just have a grip on so many young men and masculinities? And this piece of, I don't want to say piece of this suggestion, my brain just blanked out there, by the way, and I'm going to keep it in because I feel like you need to see that when I say this episode and these recordings are raw and just off top of the dome, I'm letting you know it's raw and straight off of the dome, right? But when we're kind of like thinking about the ways in which the manosphere pulls young men and masculinities in, and we're also thinking about the way in which it reaches and engages and captures attention, this inside experience framing that I was really reading and digesting in this report really started to put things together in a way that I had ideas on, but weren't able to like formulate and piece together. I found language for something that I've been trying to kind of conceptualize and compartmentalize in my own personal work. The inside experience, when we're talking about things like the manosphere or manosphere adjacent content, whether that is, the hyper entrepreneurial, narratives online, the fitness culture, whether it is in the sort of depths of the manosphere, like pickup artistry, etc., right? Or in some spaces and other places, like full blown men's rights activism and the rejection of like modernity and feminism, etc. Whatever we're talking about when we're talking about the manosphere here, there's something about the inside experience that for me is really important to think about and center in the work that we do. And when I speak to young men and masculinities and I ask them, so like, help me to understand from your perspective, what is it about this influencer that you watch that's really, important to you? Or what is it about this group of influencers or this particular YouTube channel or this particular platform that you're really drawn to? They often share and articulate in their own ways this feeling of connection. I feel connected to the space. And often we look at that and go, well, okay, what does that connection look like? What does that connection mean? Is it that you're actually connected to these folks? often not. This is a feeling. I feel connected. I feel like I know these people. I feel like these people know me because they're speaking to things that feel real and true to me at this point in my life. They're speaking about things that I'm experiencing, that I'm observing. It feels like they understand me and I feel like we're connected. Again, in many spaces, that parasociality, there's that parasocial relationship and connection to some of these influences. When we're talking about the inside experience or creating and crafting that inside experience, when we think about the pervasiveness and just how populous the extremes are right now for young people, connecting and following someone around for hours on end, what they're doing, how they're showing up in the spaces, the way in which certain camera angles are set up is almost as if you're in that interaction with them. You're seeing this happen in real time. You're one of the people involved in those spaces. You're one of the group. That inside experience is creating that engagement and creating that sense of connectedness, that perceived connectedness, if I'm being really specific with that. Even down to podcast spaces and the pull of podcasts that are often, 2 or 3 people, men and masculinities, talking about experiences and bringing in fan questions, but also talking about things that they've seen in their specific, Telegram groups, etc. Right? They're talking about the community and they're bringing those communities in. It feels like an inside experience. You're not just being spoken at, you're talking with these people. You're seeing and experiencing some form of what you feel like or what they feel like a social connectedness. This is really important to think about moving into some of the work we do with young men and masculinities moving forward. If you've followed me before, if you've seen some of my content, whether it's on here, whether it's on Spotify, whether it's on Instagram, TikTok, etc., you know that I'm very big on attunement as a part of this work. And attunement is not agreement. Attunement is helping us as people who work with men and masculinities, or people who are in proximity to men and masculinities, trying to get a grasp on what is driving the behaviors. We're trying to conceptualize the why behind the what. What is driving those behaviors, or specifically why? Why is this particular framing important, and how is that why driving those whats? Whether that is expressions in person, online, beliefs about culture, women, etc. What's the driving force behind that? That's what attunement seeks to do. And often when we're thinking about the pull of some of these spaces, we're looking at it from the sense of, okay, these boys, these young men are just going out here trying to search and find for the most outrageous, outlandish perspectives and following it because it's controversial. But here's something I just want to float out into the ether, into the space. What if there is a feeling of connectedness that is creating that impression of closeness? And over time, that closeness comes into trust. I trust this voice because they're funny. To me, they're funny. To me, they're humorous or entertaining or educational. Over time, through that, cultivating the inside experience, you kind of build that sense of, I understand where these people are coming from, and these people are speaking to things that I agree with, and I find that educational and entertaining. And as a result of that, this is where I'm spending my attention, because they speak to X, Y, and Z things that feel true to me. And because of that, I feel like I'm a part of something. That connectedness, that searching for being connected to something and being a part of something bigger, drives some of that engagement, drives some of that participation. And when I say participation, I'm talking about attentional participation. I'm going to watch this and I'm going to follow these voices. I'm going to hear what they have to say because I've listened to them already. I know what they think about X, Y, and Z, and that's interesting. That's important to me. That's something to really think about from an attuned perspective, not to justify the behaviors, to be really clear, not to create this sense of, okay, well, if that's what it is, and that does that mean that what they've done or what they think and what they believe is okay? Absolutely not. We can hold critical space whilst also centering compassion. We can hold challenge whilst also holding humanity. And this episode is not about looking to justify or rationalize proximity to manosphere-adjacent creators or voices. It's about understanding what is the pull. Because if it is about creating an inside experience that is most helpful and useful for young men and masculinities to connect and engage, what does that look like for us as professionals, as educators, as researchers, as people who are looking to counter some of those narratives, those ideologies in the spaces and places that we often frequently speak to? what does it look like for us to create an inside experience instead of going in and being like, okay, as an expert, I'm going to tell you what's wrong with that perspective. That's not an inside experience. That is I'm talking at you instead of talking with you. What does it look like to create an inside experience where you might be co-creating some of the delivery? What's important to you? What are we missing in terms of what we're bringing into the space? How can you look at this from the actual lived experience and then go, I think what you need to look at more is this. I follow this person more because of this read. What does it look like to create work that's in collaboration with young people and young masculinities, as opposed to in condemnation? And when I say that, please hear my heart. This is not me saying that all of us in this space are approaching this work from a condemning posture. But what I do think is important is that we look at and reflect on the ways in which we might be creating inside experiences, but also might not be facilitating those inside experiences too. Because when we're talking about something as polarizing, as dysregulating, as activating, as manosphere-adjacent ideologies, we're not just talking in the abstract. Those ideas and those belief systems can normalize real world harm, whether it is in school spaces, whether that is in the community spaces, whether that is in the online or digital worlds. It does create and often normalize or attempt to rationalize harm. How we create the learning spaces, the reflective spaces to consider those ideas, consider that proximity, whilst creating that inside experience and facilitating deep engagement, for me, is massively important and something that I'm really thinking about as I move into other streams of work over the rest of this academic year, but also moving forward into the future as well. How do we create that inside experience to disrupt, to lovingly, compassionately challenge, and where necessary, really hold the line and critique and actually name and be very firm with our naming of harm and harm cultures? What does that look like? How do we do that? How do we create that? How do we facilitate that moving forwards? So I just wanted to record this stream of consciousness because at the time of recording, this is just something I've literally processed and I'm actively processing right now. And I think it's something that I want to do more of, like some of the data that I'm looking at in real time. How is it showing up for me? How's it showing up for me in terms of the work that I'm doing and some of the things that I'm thinking about modifying? What are the real world applications of that to the work itself, and how does it show up, and how does it maybe not show up as much? I'm quite interested in doing more like this. So if this is something that you're interested in, then please let me know. I'm happy to do more of them. And as always, as I haven't mentioned this at the start of the video, and I usually do that, this is my perspective and not the perspective. So please don't take this episode as this is the truth now because I've said it, or this is the truth based off of what this research or body research is saying. I'm always keen and big on, check the data out for yourself. Check what that means to you, how that shows up in the spaces. Test that with some of your peers and colleagues or other people in your community. That's important. That's something that I feel is generally missing in the spaces and places that we're part of. And I don't mean that in a shady way. I mean it in just the accessibility and the fast-pacedness of our world. Sometimes it's just easier to go, okay, if someone said that, that's true, instead of actually looking at the data ourselves and drawing our own conclusions. So I encourage you to do that. I encourage you to take a look and explore in your own time. Because again, like I said, and I'm not, there's no affiliation to the folks at Equimundo. It's just a genuine kind of, respect for holding some of these mirrors up and just giving lenses that, is important for us as human beings and humans doing the work to reflect on and constantly adapt and evolve in relation to suggestions and sort of data sets that come forward. So I'm going to leave the episode here. Thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate you. I'm thankful for you. I hope you found this episode useful. And if this is your first time here, I hope to see you in a future episode very, very soon. And if you are a returning listener, thank you so much for your support. And I hope to see you in a future episode very, very soon. Stay well, stay blessed, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.